Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Friday review. Today, I am now getting around to reviewing The Unknown, the new 6th album from West Yorkshire based thrash metal band Evile. Evile spelled with an E. 2 E's. Released on July 14th via Napalm Records. Without further ado, let's begin, shall we? Alright. Now, before I get into giving my thoughts on The Unknown, you know what I have to do. I have to do a track list rundown so I can tell you folks what are the songs that are on this album, how many tracks that are on this album, and what is the time length for this album. Since this album consists a total of 10 tracks, it clocks in at the length of 46 minutes and 57 seconds. So, these 10 tracks are, of course, beginning with the title track, The Mask We Wear, Monolith, When Mortal Coils Shed, Sleepless Eyes, Out of Sight, At Mirror's Speech, Reap What You Sow, Beginning of the End, and then finally ending with Balance of Time. So there you go, folks. There's your 10 tracks. Shit. Normally this would be the routine of where I would just slap my notes aggressively or just across my microphone or whatever, here, before, I would jump into the actual review. As you can tell, that's not happening. And from what the album that I'm reviewing today, it's probably at best that you're now beginning to understand where I'm now going with this. And you're about to find out. All right. So, a couple years ago, after a decades-long hiatus, Evile returned with what was their most heaviest effort, with everyone, including me, stating that it was easily one of their finest albums to date. We all felt afterwards that because of the newfound brutal direction that Evile took with Hell Unleashed, that it would lead to expanding on that sound for subsequent albums. Well, you can say it led to something, alright, but not what anyone would have suspected. When news broke out that they were working on a new album, we were thrilled. Then in the early days of June, they released a video for the title track, then a couple more before its release date. Now, I didn't listen to any of the singles prior to the release, and it was just before doing this video where I finally got to listen to it. The reasons I held off, because, well, I was occupied with listening to other new releases. But I made sure that I had this in the runner for when it was time to give this a listen for a review, here on the channel. So I made sure that I didn't spoil anything. Till I noticed the score that this was given on the Metal Archives. Now, I know, I try not to read or watch others' reviews. I like to go into something with no thoughts of others, but this one had me curious. And that's what led me to finally give this a shot. Because after all, Hell Unleashed was very impressive. Just go and watch my review. Now, I know I've been using that word a lot, but bear with me. I only gave this one listen. And with that one listen, I pretty much had all the things I needed to say here. Now, I'm not going to be shitting on this, but I am going to lead you all through what was going through my head when listening to this. And I'll give you a heads up that my thoughts began to change throughout my entire first experience. And right now, only experience. But we'll see. It might change afterwards. So, here's how it went. I decided to listen to this album on YouTube. I put it on through my Amazon Fire Stick, so I had this playing through my TV speakers, and I just began pacing around my room, absorbing this album. From the very first track, the title track, what bestilled upon me was an obvious musical shift in direction. Alright, changing my notes here. Switching to page. Whatever. The page. Pages. Oh boy. From the rather clean guitar notes or tones to the pacing and old Drake's vocals. Oh boy. It became very obvious that the Black Album was on heavy rotation. As this song kept going, while I could also get the Alice in Chains vibes, think recent day Alice in Chains, but there was also another band that began entering my brain as I was processing this. I began hearing some of Avenged Sevenfold. I know what you're about to say. No, I don't actively listen to them, but curiosity does kill the cat. So this was all going through my head. Then once I got into the second track, The Mask We Wear, it then slowly starts to unravel itself to me. If The Unknown is their attempt at a Enter Sandman-like song, then this is their Sad But True. It practically is Sad But True verbatim. It kind of then became a rather dark cloud hovering over me, and as this kept going, I then got to Immortal Coil's Shed. And that's when the light bulb in my head lit up. Not only were they copying the sound of the Black Album, but also the track list format, cause this song here is basically the Unforgiven. I then start thinking, what the shit? This couldn't be any more the worst timing to have released this album, cause Metallica already put out a record this year that has a couple of tracks that feel like leftovers from the Black Album. At least Airborne waited a year or two to release an album after AC/DC. So I just began thinking that after the years of Evile being compared to Metallica, I thought after Hell Unleashed that it seemed like that they were going to go past that. It's like, oh, you thought we were done wanting to sound like Metallica? Just wait and see and hear. But as soon as I was dreading the next song, they then start throwing curveballs, making sure that the listener didn't go and think that they accidentally rebought the Black Album. Sleepless Eyes is practically what you would have thought the new album would possibly sound like. It's in the same direction as the material that was found on Hell Unleashed. It's a vicious thrasher and easily one of the best songs on this album. Then after that, from here on out, it's like it becomes a different album than what it was at the start of this. I swear, at mere speech almost sounds like Be Driven by Demons by Pantera. From there, I was now no longer getting those Alice in Chains vibes, nor never any Load era vibes, as that review on Metal Archives was pointing out. Or made me believe is a better word to put it. This album has now turned into your standard 90s period groove metal album that you would get, that would get put out by some of those classic 80s thrash bands. You know, by the time of grunge and everything, you know, they all began to kind of change direction. Well, there was a period where a lot of thrash metal bands kind of had to change some of their sound a bit to kind of mix in with the 90s, and that's what I'm getting from this album at this point in the second half of The Unknown. Thankfully, the album ends with Balance of Time, which is another blistering thrasher, and probably the second best song on here. Yes, two of the best songs on this album are pretty much the straight ahead, just in your face thrashers. The stuff that sounds more like Hell Unleashed. Now, I don't mind the other, there's really not a whole lot of songs on here that I don't really hate, but I'm gonna go further here. I'm gonna continue on further now, because I came out of this with perplexed feelings and mixed emotions. Like I said, I'm not entirely shitting on this, but I am questioning their creative decision. I don't hate it when bands experiment, but what I am critical of is when bands decide after releasing such a greatly acclaimed return, they then follow it up with something that takes a 180 U-turn and that it possibly alienates its audiences. It's like you get them back, but all of a sudden you turn your audience into literal test subjects. I know, this might be coming across a bit too harsh, but you get where I'm coming at it, you know, with this. This is not entirely awful, because I'm not one of those type of people that goes, oh, it's absolutely awful. You know, I got an open mind. But at times, it feels sort of unnecessary in places. The first portion, that at least. And kind of is just filled with filler. The first part is memorable for other reasons than being great. And what is good is not too shabby like the two thrashy songs on this album. And what's left is just heads straight into the background and becomes random noises. That's where I end up at, you know, where I ended up here in the end with this album. It's just kind of disappointing, especially coming off the heels of such a barnstormer that was Hell Unleashed. So there you go, folks. There's my thoughts on The Unknown from Evile. So what is my rating? I hate to do this, but I'm giving this at least a 5.95 out of 10. I know I kind of cracked there a bit, but I'm very perplexed by the creative decision that they went with for this album. Again, it's a bold move to pull this, but I'm just questioning that. Was it necessary? I know they might defend this album, and I'm not going to be that surprised if they do, but if they somehow later on end up questioning their decision to want to do this album, then that's where it kind of overemphasizes my entire thoughts here, my opinions of this. You know, it is not a horrible record by any means. I know that's a pretty kind of low, but I tried to give this the benefit of the doubt. And I want to continue to give this the benefit of the doubt. And I want to give Evile the benefit of the doubt. But all I gotta say is, was this worth it? I hope it was. I hope this album was worth it, because of, it seems like time will tell with the fan base and so on. So there you go. Again, not entirely a terrible record, but just one that kind of just sets itself into the background and is just pretty much just filler. And also a lot of stuff that kind of makes you go and scratch your head and just go like, what were they thinking? And so that's where I'm just going to leave it here. I'm going to leave it at that. So for those who might have checked out The Unknown, if you're one of those who are just like everyone else that loved their last album, if you were obviously one of those that was taken back by what they put out here, if you have any of those thoughts, let's say you also have thoughts that are positive, but in this case, if you got thoughts that are negative, you can leave those thoughts in the comments section below. But if you have not yet checked this album out, and again, you might have been hearing the sort of response that this album has been getting, and especially if you're really one of those that really loved Hell Unleashed, all I gotta say is try and go into this with a bit of at least a open mind, or just see if you can get into it. I don't know. You may not probably feel like wanting to spend, let's say, a lot of the money on, let's say, a vinyl pressing, or let alone a CD pressing. And maybe I might urge the idea to listen to some of this on YouTube. Maybe sample some of this, see if it isn't. But if you've got the patience and you've got the money that you are willing to spend on this album to give this a shot, because you're one of those who might be like me that has a bit of an open mind, again, the ball is in your court in that part. So, this is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.